Thank you for joining us on this very special edition of our program where we'll take a look at issues in our community and how they impact on you as you continue to integrate into our community here in the United Kingdom. My name is Tunde Alabi, and joining me is my regular guest, Jennifer.
How are you?
Jennifer Obaseki. Jennifer Obaseki is a senior partner at Obaseki Solicitors here in London. On the show today, we're looking at the issue of identity, aliases, and change of name, and how they impact on your application for British passport. How
And
does
also your life, whether
Kind
it
of
impacts your
course.
kids,
Yes,
your wife,
absolutely. We've had this in our community where people, for whatever reasons, have one name, and then in another official document they have another name, or we have people who have kind of a this of birth different from another date of birth in a
so
previous
legal date of birth
Yeah.
where mistakes are made, aliases, nicknames,
in previous passports. So
Anglified names.
how do these errors, deliberate or
Mistakes, some of them.
mistakes, impact on your eventual application for either indefinite leave to remain in the United Kingdom or application for British passport? These are the issues we'll be looking at on the show today, and thank you for taking the time to join us. Jennifer, say hello to our viewers.
Hi, well, on Truth and Justice, I like to try and bring up issues that are important and impacting members of the community, or just informative, helping those who may work on frontline jobs and then come across such situations and due to culture may not understand how something has happened, or really just knowing how you can help yourself.
So let's stay with the topic. We have your name, your identity, and when I'm your identity, I'm talking about name and date of birth, other issues around that identity,
I think it's going to be
and how
distinguished
they impact on
legal name and maybe a name that you may have acquired or used or adopted during the course of your life. So the legal name and your legal date of birth is the day you were born, whether it was recorded on a birth certificate by a registrar or a state government. However, in the location you were born, how the birth should have been registered. If you were born in a place that didn't have a registration, and it took maybe your parents or your caregiver to take you to another state or a location where even years later, in some situations, where your birth was recorded, and it may have been recorded wrongly. So that's one of the ways that you get the wrong date of birth. Other times, documents being translated from one language to English. Another way that you may have the wrong date of birth is if your parents died and then somebody else had to try and acquire that registration for you, and again, just did not know this precise date of birth. And other times, it may even be where you've adopted the wrong information and recorded the wrong date of birth yourself. But when it comes down to names, again, your legal name is that same name that was put on your birth registration. So that's the name you were given once born. There's only the type of children that they call foundlings, that maybe they were not named by their parents, but named by people who found them, and then later that name gets recorded. But other instances, like we explained, when people use aliases or shorten their name or use nicknames, and that becomes an adopted name on their documents, and therefore it differs from the name that they were given at birth on their legal name.
So, Jennifer, I want us to break this down in a way that our viewers will understand the implication of this on them. So, our viewers who are already in the United Kingdom, they got a name because there's no way they will be in this country without a passport.
Exactly.
But the problem is, at a point or at some points when they arrived in the United Kingdom with a particular name on their passports, after some time they have a different name,
or you start using a different name.
they started using a different name, and that name is now again registered on
Official documents.
Official document. So years after, this is the United Kingdom. Even if you have stayed 20 years, they will find out whatever name you had in your first passport. So how do you deal with this matter? I'm sure you do understand what I'm talking.
Yes.
We have instances where people have multiple names on same person, bearing multiple names on official documents. How does that impact?
It's really important, because what you can have happen is basically your children then using the wrong name that is not the correct name. You yourself can choose to change your name. So you change your name by doing a change of name by default, or adopting a change of name deed, where you swear an oath to renounce any previous names you have used and only continue to use the new name that you have adopted or chosen, and that will become your new legal name. But what you said about the importance, now that most passports are digital, the UK government does not allow for you to have another international passport in a different name that does not identically match your UK passport name. So we're seeing a common trend of people who are needing to change their names in either their foreign passports or make declarations to explain why they have a different name in their foreign passport if it hasn't expired. During COVID, there was a delay in many people getting their passports that had expired. Not just UK passports, because of embassies closing and other issues. So there has been that issue where people have managed, after making an application, waiting, getting a passport, but then there being errors, mistakes, not having put all the names on because of the digitalized process, typos, missing letters. So the UK government is quite understanding of the fact that there are cultural reasons why people might shorten their name. Even when you're applying for the UK passport, they usually only allow first, middle and last name, and put just initials or notes in the passport to recognize any other legal names you may have. So it's important that you understand that you must remember that if you start presenting a different name, or they know you as one name at work and another name somewhere else, it may look suspicious and you don't want people to look at you suspiciously. It may also affect you when you're doing things like DBS checks and security checks. So apart from the passport, it may interfere with you getting some kind of promotion or passing some kind of security verification. So you want to be very clear as to what you're going to use consistently legally and what you're going to use consistently on your documentation, so there's no conflict and no challenge.
Okay, so I need us to break this down very well. So say for instance somebody arrived in the United Kingdom with a name Chukwumerije Obiajulu in the initial passport cleared by the entry officer.
So that's the name on their legal travel document there.
Yeah.
And then
Chukwumerije
they got a visa in that name. Brilliant. Yes.
And then 5 years after, at the point of renewal, their Nigerian passport, they probably, maybe the person claimed to have lost the passport,
or they lost their passport, and when they went to renew it,
they
so
didn't
put the whole name, they just put the shortened name.
Instead of Chukwumerije Obiajulu, they
It's
now
a
put
common scenario.
They now put Chukwu Obiajulu. Yeah,
It's a common scenario.
How does this impact in the later years?
Okay.
What is it?
Let's assume that they managed to get their NIN done, because if it's a Nigerian person, they'll still need to go and do their NIN. Number one, if it's not recognized that they've shortened their name, it will cause them a problem. And you can't change names in Nigerian passports easily. It's usually only done in Abuja, and it often takes time. Now that they've got an online process, it can still take time and may not be smooth. So it may delay your travel plans. So that's the number one. Number two, if that person then goes on to try and get a British passport, maybe they naturalize with the long name, or then they go and use the shorter version of the name to try and apply for their naturalization in British. When it comes down to the passport application, because there's an enhanced security check, where after you've got your indefinite, there is a security check on character, etc. But when you're applying for nationality, there's an enhanced check. And that check may flag up that this person has a digital passport in another name, and therefore there is a conflict,
a clash
or
of...
there's suspicion. And therefore you'll be asked to explain, you hold a Nigerian passport with this name, and now you're applying for this passport in this name, and it's a problem. So it's really, really important that you are consistent so that you don't alert suspicion.
And it's important we take note of this. It's become a trend. We've noticed this in our community. People having problems with their names, aliases, and other issues. Other problem is date of birth.
Date of birth. And
People
as I
have
said,
issues with date of birth.
that can be problematic.
And
Again, suspicion.
One date of birth and another date of birth. How does this impact in later years where you probably need to renew your passport or apply for British passports?
Once again, you may have to do a statutory declaration to outline why or how the mistake occurred, and also to clarify the error. The other thing you may need to do is get the documentation to confirm why it was wrong or to correct the error. So that might be having to go to the Population Commission, getting a new certificate if it's Nigeria, or in your country of origin, however you go about rectifying things with the registrars there to make sure that, again, it's correct and consistent.
Right. So another issue I need you to help us clarify is, where do we take the issue of identity? Where do we take it to? How say identity theft?
Right.
How common is this?
It's quite common, and that's why I always worry.
How does it affect people in our
You know,
community?
they say that our community, and when we say our community, we talk about African diaspora community.
Yes, that's what
we're
they
not
mean by
as
our community.
digitally savvy. Those of us who are mature, even me, I'm not that digitally savvy, but it means we have to be a little bit wary when we're entering our personal data into websites, filling out forms. You want to know who's holding your data. And whenever you are filling out anything, memberships, whoever you're giving your information to should be regulated by the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office. And even charities, if they're taking your data, fill out this form, put your name down here, register. Who's holding that data, and are they holding it securely? You want to know that, because data breaches lead to this identity theft and lead to many other things. So you need to be always cautious as to what an organization's data policy is. So always be guarded of that. Then the second thing is, we often note that it's hard to get any kind of, let me say, compensation when there has been the misuse of our data. People sell data. They say data is one of the biggest assets now. So you have people that go into organizations just to steal data. So it's really important that you know what the data policy is, understand what you consent to, whether you consent to your information being used, passed on in different ways. So the question you ask is really, really poignant, that we ourselves make sure that we know what we are signing up to, what we are consenting to, who is holding our data, how long they are holding our data for, and then what happens at the end of it being provided. How is it being secured? Is it being secured securely? All of this very, very relevant.
Right. And why we brought this topic today is, you should know that your identity is important. Do not think, look, the government will not know. I can change my name, I can change my GOB.
Yeah.
This country will know.
Not just this country, most countries.
No matter how long it
Some
is.
people think that they can easily just say something and correct it later. Often it's not that easy. And secondly, sometimes they just drag and forget to do it. And before you know it, years have passed. And it becomes a problem when it comes down to the naturalization. You look back across some people's documentation when you're assisting them, and you see that they've got 3-4 different versions of their name.
Yeah.
Or they've adopted a name, and suddenly it becomes very problematic for them to correct it. How do you tell your friends that you've known for the last 30 years that that's not your real name? Yeah. They know you as Susan and your name is Shadi. How do you tell them that? And not even that, if it's been passed on to your children and they have kept it quiet, maybe because that's a document or an identity that has kept you covered in the country because you came in illegally. How do you tell your children and your grandchildren that?
And that's
my
a
name
very
is not
serious
Shani?
issue.
It's a very
For a
serious
lot of
issue.
people, some people come into the country with a different name, and then over time they're settled. Now they want to change to their real name, which is probably different from the name which they have come into the country.
You know, the good thing
that
is
becomes a
the
problem.
Home Office understands these situations. Sometimes people can be trafficked into a country and told to use a name. So if they've been, let's say, they think somebody has saved them from a situation and said, look, use this name, otherwise you'll get arrested. And they'll be so scared to use their real name, and years will pass. They get their temporary, leave to remain, and then they get their permanent leave to remain, and then they get their British. How do they now, change all of that? But the Home Office can understand. So it's really important that you realize that there is that discretion within the Home Office, that if you give a reasonable, understanding explanation, that they may understand why your date of birth is different, why your name has transcended and you've used an adopted name. They may even understand why you've used a different nationality. There are some people that are not from South Africa, Sierra Leone, or not even from Kosovo, and they understand that people have adopted these things and these inaccurate backgrounds and inaccurate immigration histories, and therefore, in order to make themselves clear and clarified and corrected, the Home Office at times may agree to change what is recorded officially.
Otherwise, it's going to raise a flag.
Pardon me?
Otherwise, it's going to raise a flag immediately.
It's not just raise a flag. It may raise a flag there. It may raise a flag back in your country of origin when you're trying to deal with your inheritance. It may raise a flag when you're trying to claim pensions across Europe, because one country may have that information either due to colonial links or due to some other international treaty, and you might not realize what information is being held out there by governments and security forces. So it's important that if you have a situation, that you seek advice, but you do correct your true identity. I feel that many people don't realize how easy it is to do, and therefore continue to tell the lie, not realizing it will affect them down the road. When you use somebody else's identity, what happens when they go and get a passport? What happens to you if you've adopted somebody else's identity? It can come back and haunt you. That's what can happen. But if you give the explanation as to how it's happened, so far as it has not been a deliberate identity theft, because that in itself is a crime. So if you have actually willfully stolen somebody's identity, used it to get some kind of advantage, maybe use it to go and get a mortgage, that is identity theft. That is, something you should go to prison for, because you have intentionally gone out to do that. But there are other situations where you've been given a name, come into the country, using it, not realizing that it is not your true identity. Maybe you were trafficked in and somebody's doing. What happens when the real owner of that name now realizes that you've got a driving license, a passport, a mortgage in their name? It becomes a problem. You become the person that's committed identity theft. So if you are finding that, okay, actually, that's not the true name that I was given when I was born. This uncle or this auntie asked me to start using it. What's my true name? Let me rectify this. It's incumbent on you, once you know that it is an error, to try to rectify it. And there are legal routes for you to do that. So get advice.
Get advice if for any reason you find yourself in this position, or you know anybody who is in this position who probably who has come into the country with a different name in their legal document and now do intend to have another name, their true name, or have got problems with that date of birth, and there's a need to correct it. It's not a big deal. We see some of those things, and as she said, the Home Office quite often can understand the situation. You should take the appropriate steps, speak to your Citizens Advice Bureau,
there are other people,
solicitors, or get in touch with us on the program.
Just to remind people that sometimes DNA tests prove that some children are not the biological children of particular fathers.
Okay, so the question is, if you have a child abroad, you're a British citizen,
And
you need
applying
to
for entry clearance, okay.
apply for entry clearance for your child, they will normally require you to do a DNA.
In some instances, yes, that's right.
So at the point of carrying out the DNA and the DNA proves negative, shows that
It's not your child.
you are not the biological father of those child. What is the implication on the application, entry clearance application, and what is the way forward? Can such a child still come in on that man's name?
Two things. If you are still willing to have that child within your household and adopt the child or make the child a child of the family, yes, you can either legally foster the child or outline that you're not the biological child, but if you're a married couple, it's still a child of the family, and often the visas are still allowed. You may take the steps to go ahead and legally adopt the child, but once the child is born in a marital union, and that happens, if the couple agree that the child should still remain a child of the family, then it's fine. We have been successful in such situations in assisting people in coming into the country.
So even when the DNA proves contrary to the fact that the man is not the biological
absolutely
father.
If they are married, it's a child of the family, it's a child of the marriage. See it like that. And if the child has already got a birth certificate and bearing the person's name, if the child is a welcome child, maybe as you put it in that way, from an affair, then still, if the child is an accepted child of the marriage, then you continue and outline that the child is an accepted child, a product of infidelity, but an accepted child of the family. You have situations like this where there is a death. Let's say that the parents die, and then the grandparents seek to bring the grandchildren into the country. Sometimes you may have hiccups in that situation, but still you can argue, if the children are accepted children of the family, for it to still progress and that you can have success. So don't give up, even if there has been proven infidelity through DNA. If the children are children of the family, insofar as it's not to deceive and they are children of the family, you argue your point and you can be successful.
That the marriage still remains following that.
Let's hope the marriage still remains.
All right, Jennifer, thank you for your time on the show. This is how far we can go. We'll come back again, take a look at other important issues in our community that is important. We continue to educate and enlighten our community. When we say community, we mean people from the African community who are resident in the United Kingdom.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the community we like to serve, and we enjoy serving that community. My name is Tunde Alabi. Thank you for taking the time to join us on the program again.
Thank you, and remember, protect your identity.
Thank you. Protect your identity. See you again.
See you. Thank you. Bye-bye.